Dear friends, this is Mohammad Irshad SQLC. I will be uh, discussing constraints in SQL, some of the constraints in SQL such as not null, unique and check constraints. See, the learning objectives with the aid of this video are a student can learn about constraint in SQL. They can enforce constraint on any SQL server, and student can enforce constraints on data using not null, unique or check constraints. The things that we will be discussing are what are constraints, and then types of constraints. Types of constraints in the sense some of the types that we will be discussing here are not null, unique and check constraints. First of all, what are constraints? Constraints are the entities that enforce certain rules on the data. For example, if you consider a salary attribute in an employee table, it cannot be null or it cannot be zero. To enforce such rule, you can use the constraints such as check constraint or not null constraint in case. And accidental deletion of table which has dependencies on other tables or other tables are dependent on this table, this can be avoided using the constraints. Creating a constraint. When do we create? When can we create? We can create a constraint at the table creation or after creating a table using the alter command. And naming a constraint is a very important thing here. You have to name a constraint, such as for example, I told you the salary column, there we can create a constraint. You have to name that constraint so that if you require to alter it or drop it or add a constraint, you require to name the constraint. You have to name the constraint. If you don't name the constraint, whatever the server that you will be using, it will name with its default naming values, which is sometimes very difficult to understand or which is very difficult to obtain from the server. We had to do some additional work to get that particular name, and then we can make the changes to the constraint that we have already created. Types of constraints that we will be discussing: not null, unique and check constraints. Not null constraint ensures that column contains no null values. No null values. That is, the user has to enter some value. User has to enter some value to that particular attribute. For example, here in this case, we are creating a table by name employee, which has these columns: employee ID, last name, salary, commission, hire date, and etc. See, last name, here we are providing a not null constraint. That means that you have to enter some value to the last name. And hire date constraint, for hire date we are deploying the not null constraint once again. That means that there should be some value with respect to date that should be entered into the hire date column. And you can look the difference that we discussed earlier. One is, we have not named the constraint for the last name, we have just given the constraint that has to be deployed. And then here for hire date, we are giving the name to the constraint, which is employee underscore hire date underscore date underscore NN, which stands for not null. And here, this is the syntax that has to be followed out. After specifying the attribute, its type, then you have to specify the constraint. You have to specify the constraint that you are deploying it with the constraint name, such as here employee underscore hires date underscore NN, and the type of the constraint is not null. It is username, and here we have not specified the name for the constraint, so system will generate the server, whatever the server that you will be using, that will generate a name for this particular constraint. But it is usually a good practice to have the name of the constraint. Then unique constraint. Unique constraint ensures that no two rows have same values. No two rows have same values, and it allows null values, because no two null values are equal to each other, and we know that null is not equal to itself. See here we are the example, create table employee ID, last name, email, and then we are specifying the constraint at the end. So this is at the end also we can define the constraint, or we can enforce a constraint. See here we are deploying the unique constraint on email attribute, such as here constraint email emp underscore email underscore unique key, and then the type of the constraint is unique, and on which column it is the email column that has been passed to this unique, and it enforces the unique key constraint here. So what actually it ensures that no two employees can have the same email ID. That is what it has happened, and you know it. Whenever you create an email ID, if it is already exists, then you cannot create the same email ID with the same name. So this is a word that will be used here. And then the last constraint that we will be discussing here is the check constraint. It defines a condition that each row must satisfy. It defines a condition that each row must satisfy. See here we are deploying it on the salary column. Salary column, as I said earlier, here we are mentioning a certain condition here, salary greater than 5,000. That means that no employee in the employee table can have salary less than 5,000. They can have whatever the salary that you will be adding up or you will be inserting, it should be more than 5,000. The salary should be greater than 5,000 for each of the employee in the employee table. So this is what the check constraint will be doing. Thank you for listening.